Greetings, everyone. My name is Justin Reich, and I'm here with Paul Schubert, and we're extremely excited to welcome you all to this live event as we head towards a wrap-up of our launching innovation in schools course for 2019. Paul, do you have the thing running in the background? It might be this live event as we head towards a wrap-up. Is your computer playing the video call? That we might be getting some feedback. Do you have the thing running in the background? It might be here. Let me mute.
Yeah, let me.
All right, that fixes it. Paul, let me know when you get back and get things sorted out. But anyway, hi to, sorry for that little blurb. Hi to Frederick and to Prentice and to Astrid. Great to have you all here. For those of you who are watching now, welcome. I hope you'll introduce yourselves in the chat. And for those of you who are watching us afterwards, thanks for being here and for joining us. This is a chance for us to get together and reflect on some of the great work that's happened in launching innovation in schools over the course of this past 3 or 4 months, and to give people a sort of launching off point for the work they want to do in the future. A few housekeeping details is that the course ends on January 17th at 11:30 UTC. It'll be available for some period of time as an archive on edX after that. edX is sort of changing some of their archive policies, and we think that we're grandfathered for a while under the current regime of having things be available. It'll be available for a longer period of time for everyone who signed up for the course as a verified learner, and hopefully for a while for people who are signed up as an audit learner. And we're going to find other ways of making the course materials more accessible to everyone, which is great. And the course will end at 11:30 p.m. UTC on January 17th. If you're hoping to earn a certificate, be sure that you complete 60% of the assigned work and indicate that you've done so by filling out the appropriate checklists by the course end date to pass the course and so forth. And then there is a post-course survey, which I hope that all of you will fill out, because having you tell us the kinds of things that you've learned and the kinds of things you're doing with the course is super helpful for us in making it better for the future. So we've got Paul Schubert here, who's our incredible course teaching assistant, who's been really helpful in keeping conversations going on the forums and connecting with learners. Paul, people have met you a little bit, but do you want to just take a minute to introduce yourself and to tell folks a little bit about your background? Or remind them?
Sure, thank you. Yes, so I live and work in Toronto, Canada. I've been working at an all-girls independent school for almost 15 years now, and the last 8 of those years have been as a technology integrator. So I do a lot of work with teachers primarily, but also with students. I do co-teach several lessons that, as you know, is required. So I do a lot of research for teachers. I develop learning, both face-to-face learning and online learning modules for our faculty. It's great to be involved in the community teaching assistant role this way, because I myself took 10 MOOCs through MIT over the past 6 years, and I really enjoyed all of them, and it's great to be on this side to see a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes. So I'm really happy to be here.
Great. Paul, you've done the lion's share of work for us, sort of keeping an eye on conversations in the forums and how people have been interacting with each other. And it would be great to get some of your sense of how do you feel, what's been going on in the discussions in this class? How have people been interacting with each other? If you have any questions, sort of how it compares to previous courses that you've been involved in, that would be great.
Sure. Okay. I did notice that we have a really great group of learners, and it's reflected in the forum posts that we see. I see a lot of people being supportive of each other, but also being open to receiving, constructive criticism, feedback where people are suggesting to each other how they could make, their assignment submissions even better, but doing it very diplomatically and with respect for different perspectives. So that was really encouraging to see. I've seen it consistently through this course over the last 10 weeks. I've also seen that a lot of the problems of practice that have been put in the forums here and mentioned by the participants reflect, real world day-to-day challenges that people are facing. because of that, those people who have gone through to post their final sort of targeted artifacts for assignment 6 in the forum have ended up with artifacts that really are actionable. They can be put to use right in their own work environments pretty much immediately. So I was also encouraged by that. You don't always see as many participants as in this course run actually doing things that are going to have a direct impact on their workplace. I've also seen a lot of people sort of sharing their own realizations that they used to think that they had to do a lot more on their own to affect change in their schools or organizations, and that the course has really helped them to see the benefits of distributing that leadership among many people and working with others collaboratively and on teams to make the change happen and to bring the innovation to life. And you can see it's almost come as a relief to a lot of people that it's not all on them. So I saw that as a common theme.
Let me probe onto this. And let me just say to everybody who's watching live right now, if you have questions, if you have observations or things you want to share, it's great to have all these people from all over the world, from El Salvador, Peru, Nepal, Kazakhstan, from Estonia, from Denmark, from the Netherlands. It's really great to have a global community here gathered, even amongst our small group. One thing I want to ask you, Paul, is as you describe those problems of practice as sort of related to the actual day-to-day,
yes.
to what extent is that a synonym for sort of small bore for things that are like more kind of tinkering, incremental kinds of changes in growth, or do you think there are things like how in your view, how does people's work in the day-to-day also connect with sort of broader, more systemic change?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, from what I've seen, people are actually daring to aspire to reach for some really really meaningful and substantive changes in their schools and workplaces. So while we do see some keeping it focused on small feasible change plans, I've really seen, and we'll talk about later on some examples, kind of large school-wide ideas about affecting students across grade levels, across maybe the entire school, and I think that's really heartening as well. It's easier to choose the small incremental steps, but two of the examples that I particularly chose, you'll see one of them focused kind of bigger, and the other one sort of decided to implement something that's already been established elsewhere, but then really focus on implementing that in a meaningful way. So it's kind of a mixture of both, but I've seen a lot of big ideas that people are going after.
That's great. That's great. What from your work with teachers? I mean, it's interesting that one of the things that would catch people's attention in this course is the notion of, hey, these are challenges that you can solve collaboratively. There are colleagues in your building, in your schools, in your network who can help you do that. What do you think are some of the reasons why that might be come as an insight to some participants, and what are the resources in the course that you think help sort of unlock that thinking for people?
Sure, I think that I myself kind of experienced a bit of that when I first started one of my earlier courses through MITx, and I thought about it, and I think that people often feel isolated in their not so much in their ability to bring change, although that's part of it, but in their particular passion for a certain desired change. So a lot of us have as educators, we observe the conditions and we really feel that things have to change in certain areas based on our own experience when we see students going through challenges or teachers or whatever the challenge may be, and so we have an emotional connection to that. And if we feel passionate about it, we may float the idea of change and speculate with other people, like in the staff room or wherever, informally. But I think when it comes to feeling, like, hey, I want to take some action on this, I just think it's not part of our education as educators a lot of the time to feel empowered to actually, bring about systemic change. We think, oh yeah, in my classroom I can do stuff. I have a lot of control there. I have a lot of agency. But when it comes to across departments and at a higher level, oh, that's for the administration to do. That's not really for me to do. And I've seen that in many teachers over the years, feeling that, that they feel totally confident in affecting change at the classroom level, but not at the higher levels across the school. And I think that in the course here, this Launching Innovation course has really opened a lot of people's eyes in the right from the beginning, where you're saying, what does awesome look like? I mean, it sounds like such a basic thing to do, but to actually articulate that in writing, I think is very powerful. And I think the fact that the videos in the course show how change has been implemented in other schools and how people are working together. It's very, it's very real. It's not scripted. It's down to earth, and I think that opens up the possibility for teachers, taking this course. It opened them up for me in a big way, and I was able to really, embrace this and bring it to my school. And I'm leading now in my third year of leading a group of 10 teachers on a long term, like a 5 to 10 year plan. So it's awesome. I think those are some of the things in the course that really help people to feel like they can make a difference.
One of my favorite conversations that I've had with Peter Senge about these issues. I mean, one of the fun things about working with Peter is that he's done a ton of stuff in education, but he's done lots of things in other sectors as well, in finance and manufacturing, all these kinds of things. And one of his observations is sort of, there's no one who feels empowered to make change. It's not just a property of educators.
Right.
People who make a difference in institutions and systems are not those who are sort of, tapped on from on high by the boards of directors to say, go ahead, you're empowered to change all these things. They're just folks who sort of looked around and go, I think there's a better way that we could be doing this. I think we could be, serving each other, serving our community, serving our customers, our students better. Let's just take some steps towards doing that. So I think, I also think that's kind of rewarding and revealing to be like, I think teaching has some particular challenges related to collaboration. Like there are very few other institutions that build buildings that are designed in such a way to sort of isolate individuals from one another.
Right.
But yeah, it's a more common feature. Well, let's take a few minutes to talk about some of the final projects that we've seen. I know that there's a couple that you've identified and a couple that our team have identified that we think are just really great examples. Not necessarily the best work, but just some things that we're particularly excited about. And if there are other folks online who have questions or who want to share some things that they thought were sort of particularly powerful or useful, please let us know. But Paul, do you want to talk about one of the great Canadian projects that we?
Sure. So we had a participant named Scott, and he's a vice principal at a very small Canadian city. They have under 100,000, maybe under 50,000 people actually in their community. And his identified problem of practice was really a systemic problem of having First Nation students who come to the high school having been in separate elementary schools that are on their or in their own sort of native First Nations communities. And so when they leave those environments where they kind of grew up in, and then they're bussed out or they go out to this high school from three different communities where they had separate elementary school experiences, they face a lot of challenges just sort of integrating into that new environment. And so Scott, clearly identified, a lot of these challenges that the students are facing. It's clearly a problem that affected a lot of students, and it's not just happened in one particular year. It's happened over and over again. So, taking the approaches that we teach in this course to heart, he looked at what were the existing resources and structures in place, and he identified clearly, again, through his work and through his postings and his artifacts, certain committees and certain stakeholder groups that had been formed. And then he tried to evolve those and developed a plan to evolve the work that they're doing and try to enhance it by facilitating communication among those different groups. And what he came out with in the end, again, clearly through different steps, following the methodology, with the initial action plan and all those 3 stages that the course gives us and scaffolds with a document that he was going to take to a particular, school board director, someone in a very high position of authority, to propose a new way to use these resources and configure them to be more effective. And part of his proposal in this document is the creation of a new role. that hadn't existed in the past, and that was overlapping with some of the pre-existing job functions of different people, but really centralizing and recognizing the urgency of addressing these problems for the students, by proposing an actual new role and clearly defining what that role should do. So I thought it was a wonderful example of. Oh yes, here we go. So here's some of the artifacts. This is the asset map that Scott created, and all along, he also was giving other participants, really concise but meaningful feedback, prompting with questions, reinforcing. So that was really great. Again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of, so many of the participants in this course run are really being so supportive of each other. So I thought Scott's work was really exemplary in that way, because it took something that was a clearly defined urgent need, and built on existing culture, and extended that, and followed quite closely the structures and the methodology that we're providing in the course.
And some of the things that I really like about Scott's work here, I mean, I love this asset map activity. This is another of Peter's contributions to the course. And, it can be easy to lose track of all of the things that can be brought to bear in a school community around challenges. And this is just a really nice example of Paul saying, okay, I've got a problem of practice in the middle here. How are we going to support these First Nation students? And then just recognizing sort of all of these different other people, financial resources, spaces, times, community values, strengths that sort of can be brought to bear on one of these kinds of challenges. And then, a great initial action plan template. Some of the things that sort of stand out are just, real clear kind of what does, the future look like? What are some of the specific challenges that we're addressing? And then what are some concrete things that can be done? Well, I can set up a meeting to start having these conversations. I can start connecting with districts to see what's going on. I can get students involved in particular kinds of roles. And certainly doing all these things is like a sort of substantial body of work. It's not a trivial thing to take on all these things together, but each one of the steps is sort of actionable. If you were like, well, there's only sort of, one thing that I can handle on top of all my other responsibilities this week, it's Scott's got some things that people can jump in on. So it'll be really fun to, see how that challenge unfolds, and hopefully we'll get a chance to hear more from Scott in post-course surveys or other kinds of things about how things went. But yeah, I think it's a great example of the kinds of projects that people can take on, that have a series of manageable steps that can lead to a much better outcome, that are achievable in a length of time, and that can be done when you bring in lots of different community resources together to solve a problem that's really important.
Yeah, and just one little addition to that. I mean, even small things that Scott has done, like mentioning actual dates when meetings are going to take place in his school. I think, as a participant, when I see those things, when I'm taking a course, it inspires me, because I'm getting the message I receive is, wow, here's someone in the same course as me, and they're actually applying this right now, and they've got dates and they've got parties mentioned and stakeholders identified, and it's like, why can't I do this? I'm going to do this too. So
it's great. Our second one comes from Lisa Dix, who's a fourth grade teacher who decided to focus on family engagement. I'm pretty sure Lisa works in the old Rochester School District, which is a school district in Massachusetts where I actually had a chance to give a talk to kind of kick off their professional development conference recently, and it looks like Lisa after that had a chance to jump in and join in. And her problem of practice is around family engagement. So how do we in our community create better pathways for families to feel more connected to the kinds of work that she's doing? She did a great asset map Again, I think the exercise of sort of taking all of the good things, all the strengths there are to build on. Her comment afterwards, I realize, are how many things are on my side to get family engagement to a better place. You think like, man, this is a real tough thing to tackle. But then you sort of look around and you're like, you know what? We're not starting from zero here. Like, there are resources that already exist. There are good people that care about this. There's stuff to work on. She used the left-hand column activity and peer feedback and the action template to create a proposal for a series of meetings with parents. Let me see if I can pull up again, if I can get my share screen to work, just what this again, I think is sort of a great example of when things get really concrete. It can feel really inspiring. So Anchor, securing a solid foundation for families, students, and staff, a community outreach program to create positive relationships between the school and the families through conversations and activities. And she sort of proposed a series of meetings. It's not clear to me about how many of these she's had a chance to do yet, but like, there's a back to school celebration, there's attendance and homework how-tos, there's stuff on report cards, there's reading with your kids. There's a guest speaker that's offered. There's some school terms and communities. There's mindfulness, which is things that are in the issue that sort of in the news. And they've got a set of times that these meetings are happening. They've got locations. They've got some refreshments. They've got some babysitting that's offered. Which probably gives some other students in the community some work and volunteer opportunities, while making it easier for families to be able to participate in those meetings. I know how challenging it is for me to be able to get to school things. So again, I think she started with this kind of broader notion of like, we know that family engagement in schools really matters. How do we get people feeling really engaged and connected? And then turns that into something sort of, really concrete, really manageable, really doable. Again, some of her reflections, I think, connect to a lot of the sort of themes that we've been discussing before. First, her talking about seeing lots of other folks in the course doing interesting work. I've been inspired by the different types of problems of practice. I've been inspired to try experimenting, knowing that so many others are doing the same and failing more than succeeding. I'm trying to change out of the classroom and into administration, and the contents of the course are giving me courage to do so. So seeing other people sort of tackling these kinds of challenges as something that helps us kind of move forward on things. And then I used to think, but now I think change had to come from someone in upper administration for it to go anywhere. But now I know that it can come from anyone in work, so long as it's what's best for kids, it's data driven, and it creates a buzz and buy-in by all stakeholders. I really think that sort of gets at the heart of what we've been talking about so far this morning or afternoon or evening, depending upon where people are, is that there's really, it's not like it works every time, but there's a lot more capacity that each of us have in our roles in schools to make change than sometimes we imagine there are. Mark Van Mortel, sort of chiming in on the chat, saying similar things. Of course, helped me to get my thoughts organized and get into some great assignments with fellow administrators. So more of those, the course as a boost to some of these things. I don't know, Paul, as you hear about Lisa's work, or from what you have encountered of her work, are there other reflections or reactions that she has to what she worked on?
I think you've summed it up really nicely there. I didn't get as involved with the details of her work in preparing for today, so some of them are still vague in my mind because I haven't seen them in a while. But again, you've brought up this inspiring sort of aspect of how the sharing affects other users, other learners, and I think that's very clear in her case as well. And Lisa, in focusing on the parent aspect, links into the third person whose work we'll look at, is because she also decides not to focus solely on the parent component or the outreach to that aspect of the learning community, but she does consistently include the parents and the students outside of the classroom in her plans for mostly what's happening in the classroom. So there's a common thread there, which I think is great to see, because the parents are such a huge aspect of their children's learning.
That's absolutely right. And then, Paul, do you want to talk about Preeti, one of our learners,
Sure.
in Southeast India?
Yeah, absolutely. So I chose to focus on Pretty for several reasons, and one of them is actually that she hasn't actually done the whole, like, the final deliverable yet. She's still actively working day by day in the course, and that just sort of speaks to one of the advantages of this self-paced format. And you know, she got in from the beginning, but then she started in earnest a bit later on in the course compared to a lot of the other participants. However, having said that, she is one of the more active people, you know, making many posts in the forum, and again, being very supportive of others, and you know, following the, you know, the methodologies and applying them directly to her own context for actionable plans that can actually happen in the near future, if not immediately. And another reason that I chose her work is because she's a person who has, instead of chosen to focus on something that she would create from scratch, she's taking sort of an approach that's well established elsewhere outside of her school, and applying it to her own situation and the students that she's worked with. So she's worked with over almost 600 student assessments over a number of years, and has observed a systemic problem in the way that her school is supporting various students with special needs. And she doesn't really characterize it as a problem per se, but she says that more can be done, and we can improve the way that we're supporting these students. And so she's taking these Davis learning strategies and bringing them into her school. So her innovation is really focusing on what I call a kind of an operational type of innovation, a type of change. And her challenge is to really generate the will and the desire across different stakeholders in her school to implement this proven methodology. It already is in practice to a certain extent, but she wants to extend its application, you know, to more broadly impact the students in a more systemic way. So this may fall into the category of more incremental, that kind of change that you were talking about earlier. However, it does impact so many people. It is quite aspirational. And as I mentioned earlier, she, you know, in her initial action plan, at all three stages, she's involving the student voice and inviting parents to get in as well. So I'm not sure if you heard everything there. I just got a note there was a hiccup in some of my audio.
Oh, there wasn't for me.
Okay, so okay, good. It wasn't that long. So you know. Also, I want to highlight one thing which I think you don't see as often, which is Pretty actually exemplifies a great amount of courage that online learners, I think, would do well to embrace. I mean, she's very open about things that are new to her, and in one example, you know, she put up her asset map. And she actually used a tool that a lot of people wouldn't think to use for, you know, visual diagramming, which is Excel. And you know, another participant, you know, diplomatically, you know, said to her, well, you know, I'm curious why you use that tool. You know, it may not be the best tool to use for creating a visual diagram, and made some suggestions on what tools to use, but also, you know, how to maybe improve on you know, her map. And, you know, to her credit, she modeled, you know, a wonderful way of interacting with each other online in these learning environments. You know, she was gracious, she was appreciative of the feedback, and you know, very honest about being, you know, a novice at that particular type of computer software implementation. So I thought that was really a wonderful exchange that happened. You know, you can take a look at it in the forums. It's where she posted her asset map. So you know, kudos to her for being, you know, having the courage to be vulnerable online, because I think that's when a lot of the best learning happens, is when we you know, allow our guard to fall down and be really open to each other.
Yeah, you know, and there's something really wonderful just about sort of strangers from across the world supporting each other. There's something that makes it a little easier, perhaps, about being vulnerable to people who are sort of at a both a virtual and a physical distance. You say, oh yeah, I'll learn from that person. You know, I'm not sure that, you know, they're not going to come get me at work and tell everyone here who I work with that my Excel skills are not what they ought to be. No, I think it's great. It's really cool that Pretty is doing that kind of work and learning. And I also think it's very much in the spirit of the course to say, yeah, if there are things that are already happening in your school, keep building on and supporting those kinds of things. I mean, that's sort of one of the key ideas of the Four Corners activity and some of these other activities. What are the existing initiatives that are going on? What are the other things? If your school is already committed to the Davis learning strategies or whatever else, it's probably, if you've committed to any set of learning strategies, that's probably, a good step towards creating coherence amongst your community. And if there's already buy-in, if there's already commitment around those ideas, then, the best way to position, one of those comforting ways to position new innovation as an extension of things that we've already agreed are important. It's one thing if we say, here's a brand new idea that's totally out from, from in the United States, our baseball metaphor would be out in left field, sort of unexpectedly added. But sometimes you can take those things, which some people might take as unexpected, and say, no, this isn't unexpected. We've already agreed that this kind of thing is important. And I just want to give us one more step forward in a path that we've already committed to together. And those kinds of innovations are often easier to get communities to get excited about than things that feel like they're coming more out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is great. Any other thought? So first of all, if anybody else online has any other questions or any other sort of particular favorite final projects that you think we ought to be taking a look at, feel free to share some usernames or some links or other things like that. But any other thoughts about the final project or any advice that you have for folks as people are wrapping up in the next couple of weeks, Paul?
I think keep in mind that the forum is going to stay open after January 17th. So if you have some momentum going there with some discussions with your peers, just don't be worried that they're going to cut off January 17th. The course will be formally ending then, however. So use that as a motivational sort of element to charge off to the finish. And I will also say that while it is true that risk is lower online with learning, and being open is perhaps somewhat less risky. I mean, in Prithi's case, she's like completely open. Like, she tells you what school she's at, she tells you what her role is and all that. So, it's one of the affordances, though. I think Justin, what you mentioned is great, that we can feel a bit more comfortable to do that and to take those risks. In terms of advice, just if you feel like you're not going to get every single assignment done, but you have a real passion or a real focused idea about, say, the final deliverable, don't hesitate to jump to that and maybe skip one of the earlier assignments and work on that. As long as you've worked through those ideas and concepts in your mind, you don't have time to post it up necessarily and get the feedback and do it 100% to the letter. Don't worry about that. Just try to wrap it up in a way that's meaningful for you, that is actionable, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's great that we put things in the form of a course, and there's a certificate and there are goals and other things like that to try to sort of create some helpful accountability structures for people. But our whole instructional team, all we really care about is, are we doing things that are useful and helping people make change in their schools? And so taking whatever of these steps, I think, that are most likely to lead to, like, what of the things that we've offered for you to do, that we've requested that you do, feel like they're going to be most productive towards making change in the environments you're in. That's definitely the stuff that we most hope that you work on. All of these things, maybe some other kind of sort of parting thoughts is that, first of all, one of the ways that we think is powerful to make change is by sharing these ideas about making change with colleagues, which is part of why we made all the materials in the course Creative Commons, CC BY, open source, open license. So you can take them, so you can share them with your colleagues, even if your colleagues can't sort of do the whole course run. Maybe you can find some faculty meetings or some other times that you can show them bits and pieces that you think would be helpful to them. Some readings that are useful, some of the core videos about the cycle of experiment and experience, some of the takeout activities that we tried to make really accessible. We really want you to feel like the course materials are yours to remix and reuse, and for sure attribute where you got them from, but take them and give them life, because I think the more people in your community that feel like that develop these same kind of feelings that are so exciting to see from our learners of, yeah, I really have some ownership, I have some ideas of what we want to do together, and we're going to build a community that's excited about making change. We have 3 more courses that are coming up in the next 6 months. So if you have communities of people that want to do some things with us, we have a new course that'll launch on January 31st. It's called Competency-Based Education, the What, Why, and How. This is our investigation of a particular model of schooling and learning that has been of great interest to lots of educators in the US. And so hopefully will be of interest to you and many of your communities. Starting March 14th, we're going to have a rerun of our course, Design Thinking and Leading and Learning. Design thinking in particular uses the design thinking methodology, engineering systems design, as a way of thinking through changing practices in classrooms and changing practices in schools. And you should, but it's very similar to launching innovation in schools. If you like launching innovation in schools and you wanted to engage some other people in similar ideas, then that would be a great course. And then from May 2nd to May 30th, we're going to rerun our course, Envisioning the Graduate of the Future, which is a guided exercise around creating graduate profiles. In terms of rerunning launching innovation in schools, there's some new life that we're going to figure out for it in the coming year. There might be another version on the edX platform. There might be another version that we make accessible in other kinds of ways. One of the sort of research projects, the kind of design projects that we have on our side is trying to figure out more ways of making these course materials accessible to people in different kinds of formats that they can take and reuse and remix in their own ways. And so if you have ideas for what you think would be most helpful for the future of launching innovation in schools, for sure, please put them in the post-course survey, get in touch with us directly, ping us on Twitter, put things in the forums. We'd love to hear your ideas and your suggestions. As Abby's noting here too, any kind of stories that you have about ways that you've shared materials that other people have found valuable, those stories are really useful to us in thinking about what the future of this course looks like. Well, it's been about 40 minutes, which is a great amount of time for people who are just waking up on the East Coast, or people who are probably ready to go to bed in Greenland or in other places. Paul, do you have any parting words for our fellow travelers here?
I just say keep up the great work. It's very encouraging to see, not just how you're engaging with the course, but how you can help inspire each other. Picking up, Justin, on what you said earlier about the takeaway packages and the takeout packages, in my school, we used some of those, and even in unconventional ways, of course, with attribution, recognizing where it came from. But I had one meeting where, I just showed a 3-minute video, and it really, it sparked a huge conversation that extended beyond the meeting and got people thinking in a new way, and sort of resulted in a comfort level that they hadn't had before. And that was one of the first 2 videos, where Justin, you and Peter are sort of outlining the overall kind of concept and approach in the course, and that just worked wonders in our sort of working group here. So I encourage you to use the takeout packages, and even any of the other video resources that are there in whatever way you see an opportunity to do so.
Terrific. Well, thanks everyone who spent some time with us here hanging out, and to those of you who are watching afterwards, glad you can join us. It's great to be able to celebrate all the great work that's happened in this course. We hope many of you will join us in future courses. You'll get plenty of emails and other reminders from us about these opportunities. And thanks to everyone who's participated in this Launching Innovation in Schools run. It's great to have this community of folks doing terrific work together. So best of luck in 2019, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.